They called her the silent ghost of Sweetwater County, the girl who never spoke and never cried, even when the world crushed her down. On a freezing night in 1874, inside a filthy saloon full of drunk men and bad intentions, her own father stood on a table and sold her like a sack of grain. The men laughed when he shouted that she was deaf. They believed she was broken beyond use. But one man in that room leaned close enough to see the truth in her eyes. And when he whispered 5 quiet words into the storm, everything in the Wyoming Territory began to change. The winter wind howled through the crooked streets of Granite Peak, Wyoming Territory, slipping through every crack and every wall. Inside the Rusty Spur Saloon, the air was thick with smoke, sweat, and old beer soaked into the floorboards. Men crowded the tables, shouting over cards and whiskey, their laughter rough and cruel. In the middle of it all stood Otis Miller, drunk beyond reason, swaying atop a heavy oak table with mud still caked on his boots. Beside that table stood his daughter, Sarah. She was 20 years old, though the hard frontier life had carved years into her face. Her thin body was wrapped in a ragged shawl, her hands clenched tight beneath it. She stared down at the sawdust on the floor, her face blank and empty, as if nothing in the world could touch her anymore. When her father kicked a glass off the table and it shattered near her bare feet, she did not flinch. I said, "Who wants her?" Otis shouted, his voice slurred and cracking. "She's strong, cooks, cleans. Don't talk back. Not a word." The saloon fell quiet. Cards stopped shuffling. The piano player lifted his hands from the keys. Everyone understood this was no joke. This was a man selling his own daughter. The bartender, a heavy man called Doc Reed, scowled from behind the counter. "Sit down, Otis. You're making a fool of yourself." "I need money," Otis snarled. He grabbed Sarah by the hair and yanked her head back. She made no sound. Her eyes stayed empty as she stared at the ceiling. "Look at her. Pretty enough if you scrub her clean. Best part is she's deaf, dumb as a fence post. You can do whatever you want, and she won't tell a soul." Laughter rippled through the room, dark and ugly. In a town like Granite Peak, a woman who could not hear and could not testify was worth more than gold to the wrong men. "I'll give you $10, a voice sneered from the corner. Silas Vane stepped forward, his scarred face twisted into a grin. He was the foreman for the Gentry Cattle Company, known for his cruelty and quick temper. Sarah stiffened as his boots moved closer. She knew his smell, tobacco and gun oil. She knew what happened to women who went with Silas Vane.
15, Vane said, stopping inches from her.
He reached out to touch her chin. "Sold!" Otis shouted. "Take her. She's deaf." Vane's hand closed around Sarah's arm. The saloon doors slammed open. A blast of freezing wind tore inside, blowing snow across the floor and snuffing out the lamps near the entrance. A massive figure filled the doorway, wrapped in furs and buckskin, a rifle slung over one shoulder and a long knife strapped to his thigh. Snow clung to his beard. His eyes were cold and sharp. Caleb Sterling had arrived. The room shifted as men stepped back. Some remembered him as a trapper. Others remembered darker things. They knew he had once been a ranger before the war broke him. They knew he lived alone in the high peaks, where only wolves survived. Caleb walked to the bar without a word and dropped a heavy leather pouch on the counter. "Whiskey," he said. "We're busy," Vane snapped, tightening his grip on Sarah. Caleb turned slowly. His eyes went to Vane's hand, then to Otis. "Let her go." "It was not a request. I bought her," Vane said. "Her father sold her." "She ain't cattle," Caleb said, stepping forward. Otis squealed, "I'm her father!" Caleb reached into his coat and pulled out a raw gold nugget, heavy and dull. He tossed it onto Otis's chest. "That's worth $500. I'm buying her debt. She's free." The room gasped. Sarah looked up for the first time that night. Her eyes met Caleb's. They were hard eyes, but not cruel. They were tired, haunted. "Come with me," Caleb said quietly, "or stay here. Your choice." She didn't hesitate. She tore her arm free and stepped toward him. "She can't hear you," Otis laughed. "She's broken." Caleb said nothing. He guided Sarah out into the blizzard, lifting her onto his mule and wrapping her in a heavy buffalo robe. As the wind screamed around them, he leaned close to secure the straps. His mouth barely moved. "I know you can hear." Sarah froze, her breath caught in her throat. Her eyes widened in shock. For 3 years she had not spoken. Since the night she saw her father beat her mother to death, she had buried her voice deep inside herself. It was her shield, her armor. No one had ever seen through it. Caleb did. He turned and began leading the mule up the mountain without waiting for her answer. The climb took 2 brutal days. The trail was narrow and deadly, cut into sheer rock with nothing but air beneath it. Sarah rode in silence, her body aching, her mind racing. Why had he saved her? Why had he not exposed her lie in the saloon? They camped in a shallow cave on the second night. Caleb built a fire and handed her roasted rabbit. "Eat," he said. She ate fast, starving. "You're wondering how I know," he said calmly. "When that man cocked his pistol, your ear twitched. Fear makes people listen." She felt cold despite the fire. "I don't care why you pretend," Caleb continued, "but on this mountain, if you don't listen, you die." He turned his back to her and slept. The next day they reached his cabin, built into the cliff like an eagle's nest. Inside were books, weapons, and order. It was not the home of a savage. It was the home of a man who had once been more. "This is it," he said. "I hunt. You cook." Sarah swallowed hard. Then she took a risk. "Why?" she whispered. Caleb froze. He turned slowly. "Because I know who your father is," he said. "And I know who Silas Vane works for. Hiram Gentry." Her knees went weak. "He's looking for something that went missing the night your mother died," Caleb said. "He thinks you have it." Sarah nodded. Caleb closed his eyes. "Then the war isn't over. It's just coming up the mountain." Outside, the storm sealed the pass, and somewhere below, men were already coming. The blizzard locked them in like a prison door slamming shut. For weeks, snow piled higher than the cabin windows, and the mountain became its own silent world. The wind screamed day and night, shaking the logs and rattling the shutters. But inside the cabin, something else was happening. The silence that had ruled Sarah's life for 3 years slowly began to crack. Caleb did not treat her like a rescued woman. He treated her like someone who needed to survive. At dawn each morning, he woke her without a word and handed her tools. She learned how to split wood until her hands bled, how to haul water from the spring even when ice formed in her hair, how to skin animals without wasting meat. He spoke plainly, never gently, never cruelly. "Fear freezes people," he told her once. "Work keeps them alive." At night, they sat by the fire. The cabin creaked as the wind battered it, but inside, the warmth held. It was during one of those nights that Sarah pulled the black ledger from its hiding place beneath a loose floorboard. The leather cover was cracked and dark, stained with old blood. Caleb stopped sharpening his knife when he saw it.
"Red," he said.
Sarah's voice shook at first. It had been years since she used it freely, but as she read names, dates, and payments, her voice grew stronger. Bribes, murders, stolen land. Sheriff Miller, Silas Vane, Hiram Gentry. When she reached an entry marked with a single $50 payment, Caleb's hands stilled. "Read that again," he said. She did. Caleb's face went hard. "That was my brother." The fire popped loudly, breaking the moment. Sarah looked at him, realization sinking deep into her chest. This was not just about saving her anymore. This was revenge carved into bone. From that night on, the training changed. Caleb taught her how to shoot. The rifle bruised her shoulder at first, and her shots went wide. When tears filled her eyes, Caleb snapped at her to stop. Crying would get her killed. She gritted her teeth and tried again. By January, she could hit a card nailed to a stump from 50 yards away. By February, she could load, clean, and fire in the dark. But it was not only weapons. He taught her how to listen, how to hear when the forest went quiet, how to smell smoke before seeing it, how to feel danger before it arrived. You survived by pretending to be deaf, Caleb told her. Now you survive by hearing everything. As winter began to break, the mountain itself seemed to sense the coming storm of men. Birds vanished. The woods grew still. Caleb slept in short shifts, rifle always close. Then one morning the danger arrived. Sarah was alone on the porch, churning butter, when the forest went silent. She remembered Caleb's lessons. Silence meant death. She reached for the rifle just as a bullet shattered the post beside her head. She dove inside as glass exploded from the window. 2 men were advancing from the trees. "Come out, girl," one shouted. "Mr. Vane wants a word." Her hands shook, but her mind stayed clear. She fired. 1 man went down screaming. The second opened fire, bullets ripping through the cabin walls. Then the mountain roared. Caleb's buffalo gun thundered from above, dropping the second man instantly. When Caleb reached her, panic twisted his face until he saw she was alive. He held her tight, his hands shaking. "You did good," he said, voice rough. "You lived." Outside, he ended the wounded man's life swiftly. From the body, he pulled a crumpled note, a wanted notice. Payment upon delivery of the girl. Alive. "They have your father," Caleb said. Sarah felt the past slam into her chest. That night, Caleb made a decision. They would not hide anymore. They would go down the mountain, straight into Granite Peak. The ledger would go to a U.S. Marshal, but first they would draw the enemy out. Sarah would be the bait. Fear wrapped around her, but she nodded. She was done running. Granite Peak looked worse than she remembered. Mud, smoke, and rot filled the streets. She rode in alone at midnight, shoulders hunched, eyes down, playing the silent ghost once more. Silas Vane saw her immediately. "Well, look what came back," he sneered, grabbing her chin. "You bring the book?" She pretended confusion, pointed to the saddlebags. That was when the night exploded. Caleb's dynamite tore through the livery stable, fire lighting the sky. Horses screamed, men scattered. The white saddle. As Vane turned in shock, Sarah cut the saddle strap. The bags hit the ground. Caleb fired. The explosion threw men into the mud. Caleb dropped from the rooftop like a falling bear, smashing bodies aside with the stock of his rifle. He took Vane alive. Sarah ran into the jail and found her father broken and bleeding. They fled Granite Peak under gunfire, dragging Vane behind them as insurance. By dawn, the town burned behind them. The chase had begun. For days they climbed higher, abandoning horses, moving through snow and stone. Vane broke first. Fear stripped him bare. Otis grew quieter, shame weighing him down heavier than his injuries. When the hired killers waited for them on the high pass, Caleb made a brutal choice. Vane would walk first. Vane drew their fire. Caleb shot true. 1 man fell. Another tumbled down the slope with Vane locked to him. When the smoke cleared, the path was open. They reached the plains battered but alive. Laram lay ahead, and with it judgment. Sarah walked now not as a ghost, but as a witness. And the West was about to listen. The final stretch to Laram felt longer than the mountain ever had. The land opened wide, flat, and exposed, offering nowhere to hide. Dust replaced snow, and the sun beat down hard on their cracked skin. They traveled mostly at night, avoiding roads and towns, always watching the horizon for riders that never seemed far behind. Otis rode in silence. His injuries healed slowly, but the deeper wounds showed no sign of closing. He watched his daughter now with a strange mix of shame and awe. The girl he had sold for $15 walked at the front beside Caleb, rifle ready, eyes sharp. She spoke when needed. She listened always. Silas Vane limped behind them, hands tied again, fear hollowing his face. The man who once ruled saloons now begged for water and mercy. Sarah gave him water when he needed it. Not kindness, calculation. On the 11th day, they rode into Laram at noon. People stopped in the street to stare. A mountain man in furs, a scarred foreman bound with rope. a thin woman with a rifle and a black ledger strapped to her saddle. They went straight to the U.S. Marshal's office without slowing. Marshal Tom Davies listened in silence. He read the ledger slowly, his jaw tightening with every page. He looked at Vane. He looked at Otis. He looked at Sarah. "This book can hang Hiram Gentry," he said quietly. Within days, the cattle baron was arrested. His empire collapsed like rotten wood. Silas Vane testified to save his neck and earned a cell instead of a rope. Otis testified too, his voice breaking as he confessed. The judge gave him 1 year of hard labor. When the gavel fell, Sarah felt the weight lift from her chest for the first time in years. She stepped outside into the warm spring sun. Caleb was gone. Panic hit her hard. She ran to the livery stable. His mule was missing, his trail already fading. She did not hesitate. She rode hard and found him at the edge of the foothills, riding alone toward the mountains. He turned when he heard her approach. "Go back," Caleb said. "You're free now." "I don't want free without you," Sarah said. He told her he was broken, that the mountains were all he knew. She told him the town had sold her for whiskey. Silence stretched between them. Then she took his hand and spoke the truth she had hidden for years. "I love you." The wolf finally stopped running. They turned back toward the high peaks together. Granite Peak never saw them again. But some say that if you walk the Razorback Ridges at dawn, you might see smoke rising from a hidden cabin. A man and a woman living where the world cannot reach them, listening to the wind, understanding the silence. The silent ghost found her voice. The wolf found his home, and the West remembered their names.